if you're going to put together a good eating plan, a lifestyle of maybe not eating to live, but living to eat, or the other way around. So what would you advise?
Yeah. I always call it nutrition instead of diet, because you're right, diet has a lot of negative connotation, and I don't like it to seem like this is something hard and terrible
Hmm.
and restrictive. I actually feel like I live to eat a little bit because I love food and I cook a lot. And so I like to make food a joy for people. So when I put together a nutrition plan, I don't really focus on one type of diet. I'm not like the ketogenic diet, the paleo diet, the whatever is sort of vegan. I don't subscribe to one type of diet. I always make it very individual for people. But at a base minimum, I always say we have to limit processed foods.
Hmm.
We have to eat whole foods, so it has to have come from the earth in some sort of way. um, if you can, I always try to tell people to eat organic, eat grass-fed and pastured meats and eggs and dairy products if they're going to consume that, and limit sugar intake and alcohol. And that's kind of like my basis for what does a really great nutrition plan look like for people. And I go into other sorts of things like how do we diversify that microbiome? Some people like to talk about probiotic foods or probiotics as supplements. I always talk to people about eating a huge variety of foods. So eating 30 different plant foods a week actually has been shown as kind of the hot number to diversify your microbiome. And so I tell people they think they might be eating healthy, but they're eating kale every single day or something like
Hmm.
that, which we're not diversifying the microbiome enough with that. We need kale, then spinach, then different types of lettuce, then collard greens, all these different types of food. So I make sure people have a diverse array of colors and foods in their diet. And then along with that, I always make sure people have a gratitude practice around their food so that it doesn't seem like it's a burden to eat. Because I know in this society, we have a lot of weird mindsets around food, and I just like to make sure that people have a good gratitude and intuitive practice around their eating.
Hmm.
So that's kind
Yeah.
of my base.
No, I think that's a great definition. One thing that you said, and I'm not sure if all the viewers would know, people have a general sense of what a processed food is. Could you
Mm.
expand a little bit on where the line is when something isn't processed, but it's darn close, but maybe it's acceptable by you occasionally?
Hmm. So I would say this is probably the best example I can think of off the top of my head. Something like hot dogs, but good hot dogs, like grass-fed beef hot dogs with no fillers. That's a slightly processed food. It has to undergo a process to become into that, but it's still relatively a whole food, something like that. So that's something I see that is acceptable. Anything that comes most of the time in a package that you couldn't make at home, if those ingredients cannot be combined together in your own home to eat, then it's probably a processed food that you probably shouldn't be eating.
Yeah, I think that's a good rule. Like if you don't have a distiller to put corn into to turn it into high fructose corn syrup, that might be a problem, right?
Exactly. But people buy like good organic soups in a package, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? That have like
Right.
a real list of ingredients. You could put that together in your home tonight for supper. You might not have time to do it, and that's okay. That's considered a processed food in a way, but it could be made at your home. So that's the kind of distinction I like to make with people.
Yeah, I think that really works. So give me three things. I think people think in threes, at least I do, that we can do right now to get healthy. Picture your average person who is concerned about their health and they want to go to the next level. They only have so much time and energy. I find that making changes takes energy, and so the first thing I usually want people to do is get their energy up. And so I tell them to master the fundamentals. Start moving. If you can't run, walk, can't walk, crawl. If you can't crawl, just roll around on the carpet. Do something to get things moving. Squish and mush around on the carpet, and breathing, deep breathing, and water intake. Right. So once you get the energy up, then there's some time for changes. But keeping that in mind, picture someone who's rolling on the rug, and what would be three things you'd give that person? Because they're starting, in a sense, they're not horrified but unhealthy, but they're starting from scratch. They're exhausted. They got a million things. They've been eating processed foods, and they know the Twinkies are bad, but they're still hitting them on the weekends. What would you say to do?
You crack me up. I'm just picturing like giving this counseling to someone on the floor, rolling around.
I've done it.
Yeah. So to answer this question, I had to think about what do I counsel my patients on a lot? And I also didn't want to give overlap with what other people had said. So when I'm thinking about like what kind of choices I tell other people to make or what kind of choices I make, I always keep these three things in mind. So you're right, things come in threes. So I always ask, is this thing good for me? Is it good for my neighbor? And is it good for the world? And then I make my choice based on thinking about those three things. And so the three things I would say to get healthier right now, I think they all affect yourself and your own health, which is really important, but they affect the health of your community and the world too. So my first thing I would say to get healthier is find a community, because all the other things that come, like making those healthy choices without a community around you to do it, is going to be very, very hard. The same thing goes for people who are addicts or those sorts of things. They found if you're in that same community, you're going to have so much worse outcomes.
Yes.
Same goes for health changes. So I'm like, you need to either get your partner on board, your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, girlfriend. You need to get them on board. You need to call up an old friend that had a really good influence on you and talk to them about it. You have to get new friends, or talk to those friends that you have now about the changes you're making, and have a really good community. Get professionals on board if that's what you need. So I think that's something that's like the basis you need to do to get healthy, is have a great community.
That's an incredible point. In my experience, I grew up very much in the middle of healthy things. I was always a physical person, but my diet was very classic of the 1970s and 80s, where there were Pixie Sticks and Orange Crush and white bread, and the sugar and the amount of meat, and God knows what they were feeding those cows back then. Probably other cows, and it's probably that bad. But I had so many health issues. I started cleaning up, and as I cleaned up, I felt so good. Then I went off to chiropractic college, and I had, of course, this group of friends that will hopefully watch this podcast at some point. And I love them like brothers and sisters. And they didn't take that journey with me. They got regular jobs and went off, and they struggle with their health at this point. Mm-hmm. And I didn't purposely leave anybody behind. I took everybody with me that wanted to hear my crazy naturalist rants. And some of them joined in. It was great. But then I did just develop on my own a community of people. And at one point I realized I didn't have any close friends that smoked. And it used to be half my friends smoked back then. Mm-hmm. And, we listened to heavy metal music. We, it was just kind of like a different crowd, in high school. And then I took a different path, and I went to this, extremely health-driven ideas in my life. And that community has been amazing. I have people 7, 8 years older than me that can out-ski and out-cycle me. And it's just amazing, because they've maybe been on that path a long time, or they've done such a good job at it. And we support each other. I have one friend of mine that he got off of a whole bunch of inflammatory foods, and a whole bunch of things got better for him. And and it's just a great thing to be able to talk to him about that. And I 100% agree. And no one has brought that up in a while, that getting a community of healthy people around you, or similarly minded people to support you, is vital. Fantastic. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's something I ask on my intake paperwork with every patient. Like, do you have a community? Do you have family and friends to help you make these positive changes? And if they don't, then I bring it up. I'm like, well, like, what is your plan to do that? Like, this is amazing, you're undertaking this, but I feel like with a little support, it'll be even better. So
I never asked that question, but I'm going to start that on. Well, I go to work tomorrow. Honestly, that is. I think I'm going to throw that on my paper too. See, this is what happens when you hang around with Dr. Brittany Stamer. You just learn stuff. And I've been doing this for 28 years, and you just taught me something. And that's what it's like hanging with you. Awesome. Thank you.
You teach me stuff every single time we're together. So I'm just trying to pay it back little by little.
All right, cool.
Yeah. And so the other two things I would say is, like, Eating whole foods. So just explore that. So next time you go to the grocery store, pick out something you might have not eaten before. Pick out, if you're filling your cart with different things, like pick out something that's a different whole food. So try to replace that slowly. To go and change your entire life in a moment is very, very difficult. So just try it slowly and try not to be overwhelmed. These changes don't occur in a day. I think I see a lot of people undertaking huge goals a lot of the time. I'm going to work out 6 days a week. I'm going to change my diet. And I'm like, let's work out 1 day a week for 20 minutes. And once you have that habit down, then we'll increase it. So I say when getting the changes, especially with food, because your taste buds take time to change, your microbiome takes time to change. It's going to take some time to really like those foods. Just explore it a little bit, dabble into the world of whole food. So that would be my second thing I would tell people, because it's a little bit attainable then. The third thing I would tell people is detoxify your personal care products. So I do a lot of work with women's health, with the endocrine system, with thyroid, adrenal glands, that sort of thing. And a lot of personal care products in our life are extremely, extremely toxic for us. And I think that's kind of the new wave of healthcare that we'll be talking about more in the future. But that's something I talk with every single patient that I see. Is we go through head to toe what kind of personal care products they're using in their life, what kind of products they're using in their house overall. And we try to minimize the toxicity load, because that's removing that obstacle to health for people to heal, especially with women's health, because a lot of those affect hormonal health. So, and that's something that's relatively cheap. It's actually easier to get rid of these products and replace them with much simpler products.